Hey, this is Tyler, and today I am talking to you about being a guest on podcasts to help promote your course. Now, in the last two videos, I talked about some of the benefits of being a guest on a podcast, how to find podcasts, how to do some research just to make sure that podcast is a fit, and how to reach out to those podcast hosts. So once a podcast host agrees to interview you, the next thing that you're going to do is schedule it. You also want to clarify how the interview is going to take place. Most podcast hosts are using Skype to conduct their calls. Make sure you ask them whether it's going to be audio only or whether they want video as well. Some hosts will record video and put that on YouTube, for example. You want to make sure you're prepared for that ahead of time. If it is going to be on Skype, then make sure you send them that contact request in Skype so that you're not scrambling to get connected on Skype when your interview is supposed to start. And if you're using any kind of other program to conduct the call, just make sure you know what that is and how you're expected to show up on the call, so that there's no confusion or there's no delay during the time of your interview. So that's how you schedule the interview. Once you've got it scheduled, the next thing you want to do is make sure you've got the right equipment. Now, one of the biggest pet peeves of podcast hosts is poor audio quality. So there's some things you don't want to do. You don't want to be using the built-in microphone in your laptop. You definitely don't want to be using the microphone in a mobile phone, and you definitely don't want to use the headphones that probably came with your phone, like these little the earbuds that have this little microphone attached to them. What you need is an external microphone. Now, at a bare minimum, I recommend a mic called the Logitech Clear Chat. It's a headset. It's a combination of headphones with a microphone. You can get that from Amazon. It's very inexpensive. That should be your minimum standard of quality for an external microphone. Now, my favorite option is this Audio-Technica ATR 2100. This is also a very reasonable price on Amazon. It's about $60 or $70 US. This is a dynamic microphone, so it doesn't pick up background noise, maybe traffic outside your window, somebody else walking around your office or your house. You have to speak up close to it, and it only picks up audio that's very close to it. So this is my personal favorite, but we do have another video on Teach Online where we actually recommend several different microphones, so feel free to check out that video. Now, the other thing that you need are a pair of headphones. Now, the problem with not having headphones is if somebody's interviewing you and their voice is coming out of your speakers, their voice is essentially going to hit your microphone, so it creates this kind of a feedback loop, and it just sounds really bad, and it makes it really hard for the podcast host to edit. So you want to be listening to your interviewer through your headphones and speaking into your microphone. That'll make it a lot easier for them. So that's what you need for the equipment. Now, the other thing that you want to do is minimize background noise, minimize distractions. Make sure that you're in a private space during the time of your interview, maybe your home office or somewhere quiet where nobody's going to interrupt you. Make sure you turn off your phone, close your tabs, close social media, close email, anything that can make a noise or a ding or interrupt you or steal your focus and your attention during the interview. You want to get rid of those things. Basically, you want to be prepared to give the host your undivided attention and focus during the time of your interview with them. The next step is to give a great interview. So here's some tips to help you give a great interview as a guest on a podcast. Number one rule is show up on time. Even better would be to show up a couple of minutes early. Now, most podcast hosts are going to do a quick sound check. This usually only takes a few seconds. They might want to chat with you for a little bit before the actual interview starts. And in terms of giving the interview, so the number one rule with podcasts is that they're generally pitch-free zones. So unless you agree with the host ahead of time that the purpose of your interview is to talk about your latest product, your book, your online course, something that you're launching, something that you're working on, unless they've agreed that that's why you're on the show, you don't want to make your interview one big sales pitch. Focus on providing as much value as possible. Try to be as helpful as possible with your responses. Don't hold back. Share your best advice. Anytime you give a piece of advice or you share a specific strategy, if you can back it up with an example or a case study or a success story, you know, or a personal story, anything that supports the points that you share on the podcast helps to convince the listeners that that is in fact good advice. You definitely want to respect the time limit. So you should know ahead of time how long the interview is going to be. You might even know how many questions the host has prepared for you. So just make sure that you're not rambling on, that you're not going on tangents, that you're trying to be concise, you're being generous with your responses, but you're letting, you know, you're not hijacking the interview and going on for 10 or 20 minutes off of a single question. That's a big mistake that a lot of people have made on podcasts. It drives hosts crazy when they've got 10 questions prepared and only 30 minutes to talk with you, and you spend 20 minutes answering their first question. It just throws off the whole interview. So make sure that you spend a few minutes on each response. Be generous, and if the host wants to dig more, if you can let them do that, let them take control of the interview, and just be cautious of the time that you have with them. Now, as you wrap up your interview with the podcast host, you want to wrap up with what's called a call to action. Give the listener something to do. After spending 30, 40 minutes, you know, giving as much value as you can, being as helpful as you can, you want to leave them with the next step. So usually a podcast host is going to ask you how their listeners can get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more about what you're doing or learn more about your products and services, and specifically your online course. Let them know what your website is, your blog, social media, but give them a way to get in touch with you so that way they can reach out to you after they listen to that interview, and you can start a conversation with that person afterwards. Another thing that you can do is offer a free gift. Offer a resource, a downloadable resource that you give away on your website, but give away something in exchange for someone's email address. That's again a great way to leverage your exposure on a podcast, to build your email list, to get some of those potential students for your online course into your database so that you can communicate with them, but doing it in a non-salesy and in a non-pitch kind of way, because you're doing it from a place of giving them something that's going to help them. So that's a great way to wrap up an interview, and always thank the podcast host for having you as a guest on their show. You know, it does take a lot of time for somebody to prepare for an interview, to record the interview, and of course to edit and to promote it afterwards. So make sure you're grateful for the opportunity to share your message and to get some exposure. And after the interview is over, stay in touch with the podcast host. Again, these are influencers in their industry, so these are great people to build a relationship with. So 3 things that you can do after your interview to really solidify that relationship and keep in touch afterwards. Or number 1 is commit to sharing your interviews. Share it on social media, share it with your network. That's going to help that podcast host build their audience, but it also shows them that you know, you care enough to help to support their show and to help promote their show. Another thing that you can do, leave them a rating and a review on iTunes. A lot of podcast hosts are too shy to ask you to do that, or too humble to ask you to do that, but if you do it for them, they will absolutely love you for it. Those positive ratings and reviews on iTunes help podcasts rank higher and build their audience. So if you just go ahead and leave a rating and review for them, they're really going to appreciate it. Another thing that you can do is you can refer them more guests. I mean, ask them if they're looking for more guest interviews. If you know someone, if you have colleagues or friends or people that you've collaborated with in your industry that you think might be a good fit for the show as well, offer to make those introductions. Those are 3 ways that you can you know, give back to the podcast host that just interviewed you and is going to be promoting you to their audience. So those are some tips on how to prepare for your interview, how to give a great interview as a guest on a podcast. And remember, there are a lot of podcasts. There are more podcasts being launched every single year, more people listening to podcasts. And so there are probably a lot of great opportunities for you to get interviewed on shows that serve your target market. So if you're just getting into this, if you're being a guest on podcasts for the first time, start with those podcasts that have just launched. They're just building their audiences, you know, they're looking for their first guest to interview. Those are the easier ones to get onto. Get your experience there, get some interviews under your belt by doing that, and then work your way up. Work your way up the ladder to those podcasts that have been around for a while and that have the really big audiences. It's rare that you're gonna get booked on the biggest podcasts in your industry right away, so don't be afraid to start small, work your way up. And the great thing about doing that is you get better with each interview. You learn from each interview that you do, you become a better guest. So by the time you get to those big podcasts, you're gonna rock your interview, you're gonna do a great job. and you won't be embarrassed by the presentation or the way that you showed up on that interview. You're going to be very proud of the interview. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, getting interviewed on podcasts is a great way to build your personal brand, build exposure, build some relationships with people in your industry, and also sell more online courses. But you got to do it right. There's a certain way to do it. There's a certain way to reach out to podcast hosts. There's a certain way to give a great interview, and there's a certain way to leverage that exposure. So hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching.